Hello, welcome to Kiss My A's. I'm Emma Cownley, and this week I'll be discussing with you the creative brief. Why do you need one? How do you write one? How do you use one? I've got you covered, bro. Let's go through this because a lot of you seem to have questions about it. Number one, what is a creative brief? A creative brief is something that you give a creative so that they know what the crap they're supposed to be doing. You can't just invite someone to a meeting and say, yeah, I'd really like an email to boost my sales on this product. So if you can go in and write that would be great. Thanks. That's a perfect example of how not to do it. You need to write them a full, explicit creative brief so that they know exactly what their objectives are, what the deliverables are, who the customers are, and when they need to deliver it to you by. You've got everything laid out, you've thought it through, you've discussed it with everybody involved so that there's no delay, lag, messing around later on. And trust me, it always happens. Something comes up and you think, oh, actually, can you add this because I forgot to mention it? And oh, actually, this doesn't really work for me because the creative doesn't know. They're working blind. Unless you tell them, they don't know. So that's what a creative brief is. And actually, kind of covered why you need one. It's just making sure that your creative is on exactly the same page as you with regard to the objectives and what's expected of them. So be kind, guys. Make a thorough, proper brief so that your project runs smoothly. It'll also help to reduce how long it takes to produce the creative as well. If they have all the info they need and they're ready to go and they're supercharged, they will turn out something spectacular for you. First draft maybe a little rough, need a few tweaks, but the process should be pretty straightforward if you've given them the correct brief and they have everything they need. So here's how to write a creative brief. First thing your creative is going to need to know is what the objectives are for the project. Is it to drive conversions? Is it to increase engagement? Do you want sign-ups? What is it? What's the ultimate aim? What is the final outcome that you really, really effing want from this piece? They're going to need to know that. Next thing you're going to want to give them is details on your customers. So who is this particular piece going to? Who's it aimed at? How do they like to shop? What are their favourite things to do? Which other brands do they like? How do they typically interact with you? Especially through email or through direct marketing. How do they buy? Do they buy on mobile? Do they like to buy on desktop? Who are they? Give them a name, make them real. It's also handy to let your creative know what the use case is going to be. For example, is this a blog post? Is this an email? Is it part of a campaign? When the user comes in, at what point of the journey are they? What's their awareness like? Are they a regular shopper that has dropped a basket and needs to come back in and pick it up and carry on? Is it someone who's never heard of you before at all, ever? These are all things that are really going to inform design and copy. I can't chat to somebody like they've always known you, like, hey buddy, where you at? Come back and buy this, you silly sausage. If they're new, they're going to be like, who the hell is this? Who are you? Why should I give a rat's ass about you? Whereas if it's a new customer, I'd be like, hey, we're blah, blah, blah. This is what we do. Why don't you come on over and check us out? Because I know you've got X problem and we can solve it with Y. I also this might be personal to me, I like to have wireframes. I love a visual representation. How is everything going to be laid out? How much space do I have? And it also means that I can submit the copy laid out to the wireframe. So a designer, for example, or a front-end developer can just drag it through. Or also past examples of similar campaigns or campaigns maybe from a competitor that you'd like to emulate. That's useful. Don't forget to include all of those other useful details such as product information, links to pages on your site, brand guidelines, all of those things that aren't obviously going to go into the final piece, but they really inform the way that it is written, so they're great to have. The final thing your creative brief absolutely must have is a deadline. We want a deadline for the first draft, then we want a deadline for the final draft. If possible, always factor in a couple of extra days. It's just a nice safety blanket to have. I personally always like to know exactly where I stand with regard to deadlines because I love organisation. It is my jam. I have schedules and structures and timelines. I just love it. So if somebody's not being straight with me about when they need something, I will set my own deadline and I'll tell you what it is. Don't let that happen to you. Don't let that happen to you. And there you have it. That's what Creative Brief is, why it's important, and how you write one. I've also written a blog post on this, which I will pop a link to below, just in case you would like to have a little bit more context there. I've also included a brief for you that you can download and use. So I've done all the work for you, bro. If you have any questions you'd like to ask me for next week's video, please drop a comment below or get in touch on Twitter at EJ Cownley and I will answer your questions. Until next week, take care.